Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How's it going? Thanks for coming. This is, I guess, my second time speaking in the B&H Superstore, and boy, it's pretty impressive to walk in those doors. I don't know about you, but I had to just keep walking to get up here, not stopping at any aisles yet, but I'm hoping to spend a little time because it's like it's like a candy store. I feel like it's Christmas and it's coming. What I wanted to talk to you about today was travel photography. How many people have done a trip where you've gone out into the wilds on a ship? A few of you. Okay, great. So you know it's a great way to travel. You get on board, you check in, you unpack, and the ship moves from great location to great location. So I don't know about you, about the whole packing and unpacking thing, which I've been doing for the last week and a half. I got off the ship a week ago in Ushuaia, Argentina, flew to Buenos Aires, went to Iguazu Falls, flew to California on Thursday, flew to DC on Saturday, talked yesterday at Geographic, and today I'm here. So I don't know, I get pretty disoriented. I had to figure out where I am. So that's why it's so great being on a moving platform. And it's just the ideal platform for photography. So I'd like to have this to be kind of informal. Feel free to ask questions about any images as we go. I want to show you a lot of pictures, a lot of images. Some of them just right out of Lightroom, just literally in the last week, because I just got back, as you know. And you know, what a world now that you can go on a trip for, I was gone 6 weeks. I clicked the shutter over 15,000 times. Edited pretty harshly down to, I guess, the files, you know, less than 10,000 now. And then there'll be a cut that'll go to Lindblad Expeditions for brochures of about 100, maybe 120. And then a cut that'll go to National Geographic Stock Library, probably somewhere in the 300 to 400 image range. We'll see what they accept. And so it's a pretty brutal, I mean, those of you, I mean, the great thing about digital is, right, we can shoot as many pictures as we want, many images as we want as we go, and we have all this control because we now shoot, process, caption. So that's the great thing. The bad thing is we can shoot any number of pictures that we want, and we have to do all the work. So how do we go about doing that? So I'll talk about that as well. My clicker, there we go. So the flagship of the National Geographic fleet, which is operated by Lindblad Expeditions, is the Explorer, and this is the ship I just came off of. So I just thought I'd just start out just by clicking through some of recent images from Antarctica. Gen 2 penguins in the foreground, using a shallow depth of field, so the ship is just a little soft. What this photo is missing, I always critique my own photos if that's okay, and you can critique them too. For brochures, Isabel's sitting back there. Isabel is our marketing director from Lindblad Expeditions. There's two people in red jackets, or blue, you know, right on the bow. There's like one person walking away, but I was focused, of course, on the penguins coming across the frame. Come on. I think I'm just going to hit the button here. We make sunrise landings. So you're on vacation and the wake-up call comes at about 5 a.m. We actually manipulate the time so that sunrise isn't that early. Remember that? Judy was on this trip, actually, this sunrise landing in South Georgia. So the trip I'm talking about is Falkland Islands, the island of South Georgia, which is a subantarctic island. It doesn't get encased in the pack ice, but it's south of what's called the polar front, where the seas drop in temperature, and this is where all the upwelling of marine life happens. And South Georgia was, of course, a center for whaling back in the day because of all this life. So we're landing on the island of South Georgia with king penguins. These aren't the emperors, so these aren't March of the Penguin penguins, but these are beautiful king penguins with the Explorer offshore, coming ashore at sunrise. Another sunrise landing at another bay called Gold Harbor. So this was on the second trip. We were able to get in there. We got blown out, I think, on our trip. Or we went in the afternoon.
We went to Gold Harbor, but we didn't go to St. Andrews.
That's right.
Let me ask you about your settings.
settings.
So if you go back to the other, when you're shooting into the sun.
Ah. Yeah, so on this one, the settings, and when we talk about ISO, I'm probably, in this case, on a tripod. So I'd be keeping my ISO fairly low, maybe 200 ISO. The higher you crank your ISO, the more noise you introduce into the photo, but although that's changing with the new camera, so it depends on what camera you're using. And then to try to get the sun star, the sunburst effect, I use a small aperture. So I'm stopped down maybe f11, f16, or even f22 to get that effect. And then it's just coming up over the mountains. So you can pinch the sun on the horizon, you can pinch the sun in the nooks of a tree, in any kind of, against a building, through a steeple, and make this sun star effect. So there are ways of shooting into the sun effectively.
Are you zoomed up close? Are you far away from them? Or?
No, I'm pretty close. I'm probably with a 24 to 105 lens here, so I'm close. And probably not moving. They're coming out of the water. So this is a longer lens in this case, shooting with a longer lens. So I've got a shallow depth of field with the focus point here, right? And then that compresses these penguins against this elephant seal with the glacier, hanging glacier, and other penguins in the background. So it's very effective to shoot with a shallow depth of field so that your foreground or whatever that subject is, like with portraits, you want the person or the animal to be sharp and you let the background fall off into soft focus so that the eye is directed. We wear boots. I was actually wearing, since I helped land the Zodiacs, I'm wearing hip waders so I can get right out into the surf when these guys are coming and going. So in this case, I'm shooting with a fast shutter speed to stop the action, and you'll see in other examples where I shoot with a slow shutter speed. Wandering albatross, the bird with the largest wingspan in the world. There's one island in South Georgia where you're allowed to land. It's the only place in the world where visitors can land, not scientific parties, but visitors can land and walk up a boardwalk to see these birds on their nests. 12-foot wingspan. They only come ashore to breed, and they're out. They live very long, and they estimate that they live 50 to 70 years. And a 50-year-old bird probably will have flown 3 million miles because they continually are just circling the Southern Ocean. Cute little fur seal who will bite your butt if you could get at you, because they come ashore with all this testosterone to start breeding and building their harems of 10 to 15 animals. But they have these beautiful long whiskers. The elephant seals, they come ashore. They have bigger harems, up to 50 animals, and they come ashore to breed as well. There's our Zodiacs. We travel in Zodiacs to get off the ship, to get ashore, and for viewing wildlife. So again, this shot, of course, I'm focused on this animal, and my aperture is probably somewhere in the 5.6 to f8 range, because the Zodiac is soft, with a 70 to 300 zoom. So I do rely on zoom lenses. I do have fixed, and we'll talk gear, but I do have fixed lenses, a 300 fix that I use with a 1.4 converter. But I don't know about you guys, but when you get to be my age, I'm trying to cut back on what I carry. And the new Canon 70 to 300 L series zoom is very sharp, focuses fast. That's an amazing lens. That's the lens? That's the one that you have. We did have some seas crossing the open ocean, but that became a photographic event. We weren't allowed on deck because there was green water over the bow. So this is the bridge of the ship. I'm looking out a side window trying to shoot the wave coming over the bow. This may not make it in the marketing materials, but it's pretty exciting because everyone's up there for when that wave hits, and you can just feel the swells. I can actually still kind of feel it. Now so what did I do here to get the sun stars? I told you in that other slide how you get the burst. F22, and this is something I've just started to do more and more, because it's you've got to up your ISO to get a fast enough shutter speed and shoot at f22 so you're stopped down so that every specular highlight gives you the sunstar effect, the sunburst effect.
What was your ISO?
I'm thinking I probably had to be about 800, even though it was sunny and bright. Yeah, most modern SLR cameras, you can't even tell the difference now between probably 200 and 400. 400 to 800, yeah, you'd see a little bit more noise, but if you put it into Lightroom's noise reduction, boom, it's acceptable. These things just shouldn't be legal, what we can do now. When you think about, remember 100 film, oh yeah, I pushed it to 200 to get an extra stop, you know.
Kodachrome 25.
Kodachrome 25 on a tripod. This was an incredible afternoon. We have beautiful iceberg. This is at Half Moon Island in the Antarctic. We're getting down there now into the ice. And most people think they go for the penguins, and the penguins are great. The wildlife is unbelievable, but it's the ice. It's just the fact that you're on a continent, the white continent, that is 99% cloaked in ice. And we had the backdrop of Livingston Island there, which I'd never seen. I'd seen the island, like the lower, maybe 1,000 feet of it. I'd always been there in gray overcast days, which is very typical for this area of the Antarctic. Coming up on an iceberg with an arch in it. So again, you can see all the photographers down on the bow shooting it. I'm always torn whether to be down on the bow, right, and really concentrate on the iceberg, or to go up high above the bridge where I have a vantage point and I can put the bow in the photo. And since I'm on assignment to get images that can be used in marketing and telling other stories, this time I went high. So this one breaks the rules, huh? As far as the composition. The zodiac's way down in the lower left-hand corner. You know, I'm not even following the rule of thirds like with Horizon or anything, but I wanted to make that zodiac, I didn't have to do much to make it look small, but the perspective is you make that look small with this landscape, right, for impact. So we're going to talk more about that. How do you make, because you're going on your own trips, right? You're making your own story of your trip. And you're not looking for 10,000 pictures. If you show your friends and family even 100 pictures, you'll lose them, right? You've got to edit it down, hopefully to those 30 or 40 pictures that leave them wanting more. So how do you make images with impact that tell your story? And you do that with light, composition, and moment. That's going to be the mantra. Light, composition, moment. Early in the season down there, before all the productivity starts happening, remember it's reverse down in the southern hemisphere. Midsummer is December 21st, right? So that's our winter solstice is their summer solstice. And before the productivity starts cranking up in these areas that have been covered by sea ice, the water's very clear, so you can see the bottom of these icebergs. This iceberg is probably 20 feet tall, and you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. So it's 8 or 9 times. So it's a couple hundred feet below the water. We had an awesome morning where we had snow and blowing snow, which, you know, most normal people, I mean, just the fact that you guys are in here, it means you're not normal, right? It's a beautiful day outside, and here you are locked in a room. And people that go to Antarctica probably aren't necessarily normal either. So here we go ashore, and if you're a photographer looking for light, the last thing you want is a perfectly clear blue, what I call a disgustingly blue day, with no clouds. Here we had clouds coming by and snow squalls and snowflakes, made for a really Antarctic feeling day. If we can find a spot, we even park the ship in the ice and walk out on the sea ice. Am I moving too much for the cameras there? I'm good? All right. And I talk with my hands too. This was a dream scenario where anytime you go out on a Zodiac cruise, or anytime you just go out on a trip, you don't know what's going to happen. You have to be prepared for the unexpected. And we went out on a Zodiac cruise thinking we were just going to look at some ice sculptures and some seals, hopefully on the ice, and maybe penguins coming and going from shore, when the radio call came up that a killer whale, an orca, surfaced by one of our Zodiacs. The next thing we knew, there was 4 or 5 killer whales around, playing in the ice, coming up in the ice, and following the Zodiacs. They were very curious. In fact, this is where it doesn't matter what camera you have when you're a photographer. There were some folks on board who had been through our hands-on session, and they learned how to use their continuous function, their burst mode, where they just hold it and go click, 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 click. And just with a point and shoot, which we call aim and creates on board, because you aim and create photos. She got this whole sequence of a killer whale coming up and kind of checking out the engine and the stern of the boat, and then swimming around and then surfacing right alongside. It turned out these whales, they're top predators down there. They eat the seals, and they were hunting seals on the ice floe. So the next time they came up, they were checking out this leopard seal, and so they swam. They got together. They hunt in packs. They got together and swam and created a wave to try to wash that seal off. Others came up and put their chin on the ice trying to break it in half, and then they tried the wave again, and it was unsuccessful, but they knew it was a leopard seal, and that's not their favorite. Their favorite is the Weddell seal. So that was a very lucky leopard seal. It got away to live another day. So then my recent travels, just to go through this little travel log, was going to Iguazu Falls, the border of Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. And we were on the Argentinian side, and if you want a photo-friendly place, the Sheraton is 200 yards from anyone been there? Entrance to the national park. And they built this amazing array of boardwalks, these metal, actually, platforms that follow the waterfalls and take you down, actually, to the river. So this is where we're going below the falls to get into a Zodiac to get totally drenched out in the white water there. But it is so photogenic. So here you're literally walking out to the edge of the falls on this platform. They call this the Devil's Throat. We are looking right into it with a double rainbow. And I put a neutral density filter on it to get this, it's middle of the day, right? So how did I get it so slow? I had a polarizer on stacked with a 5-stop neutral density filter, which just holds back light. Neutral being it's not changing the color balance. Although there are weird things that happen if any of you use these, that happens with the sensor, and you always have to play with your color temperature in post-processing. So that's how I got 1 second to 2 second exposures during the middle of the day or late afternoon. So again, there's a longer exposure to blur the water, and then that's contrasted with going to my wider angle, 16 to 35, where I don't have those filters for it, because Canon went from 77 millimeters to 82 on that new lens, and I didn't want to invest in those filters again. So that's the difference between 1 second shot and probably, I don't know, 500th of a second, where it's freezing the water. Especially when you're shooting water. When you shoot water, shoot it at a number of different shutter speeds when you're working on a tripod, because it looks different at a 1/4 second, 1/8 of a second, 15th of a second, depending on how close you are to the water. And you may not like it, that frothy look. There are people that says that's not the way water looks, like cotton candy. But I tend to like that. And there are these crazy birds, these dusky swifts. I think it's the greater dusky swift. They live in the cliffs behind the waterfall. So they're darting in and out of the waterfall. How they do that without getting whacked out of the air, I don't know. So when I'm shooting, I'm always looking for places for a frame, for places where I can find foreground to frame shots. And this doesn't only go for landscapes, but if you can do that, if you like to travel to cities or markets, anytime you can find a situation where you're framing a subject, It's a way of engaging the viewer and making a more effective image because you have layers to it. So this is a tough exposure, right? You got the hot spots of the water, the shadow of the cliff, you've got sun rays coming through the mist. So this is the type of shot the camera just can't handle without some help, because the cameras, they just don't, film or digital. Are there any film shooters here? Can't handle that contrast like our eyes can. Our eyes can see 10, 12 stops. Cameras, 5, maybe 6 stops of contrast. So you've got to hold back the bright areas, which in this case I did in Lightroom, in post-processing, where you can use a graduated filter over in the left-hand corner and then come in here and hold back the values and darken down a little bit. I wasn't able to darken it down as much as I would have liked the way it looks on this projector, but then I made it a black and white, which I like even better. So if you're interested, I start seeing more and more in black and white now that I have the freedom to shoot in color and then convert to black and white. And it's actually better to shoot in color because you get all the channels and you get all the color information. So when you go into black and white, depending on how sophisticated you get with your conversions, you have all that information. Of course, iPhoto, Picasa, Lightroom have presets for making black and white conversions, but you can use those as a starting point and then work to make it so you have your blacks are black and your whites are white and you get good midtones. So then I worked on this one as well, where I'm just showing the bottom of the falls, where I didn't have that problem. There is no, I think by this time it was all in the shadow. It was a little bit later, so I didn't have to compare the hot spot around that one boulder to this shot where it's now even. So be thinking in black and white as well. And so there's another black and white conversion from a color digital frame. All right. And this was the view from my hotel balcony, my hotel room balcony at the Sheraton. You can actually see the falls. And I was only on the second level, and I think there's, just go up to 5 levels, something like that. And I'm not sure what the bird is. I think it's a vulture, but I don't have enough resolution to tell. All right, so with that little introduction, I wanted to show you just a quick 3-minute slideshow to music, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. And what we do out on the ship on our photo expeditions and on our, just any trip, and we'll talk more about how the trips go, we invite folks who travel with a laptop to contribute their laptop to a laptop gallery. The rules being that you can show a scrolling slideshow in a loop that lasts about 3 minutes, and then we can go around the room and see the work that everyone's been doing, and it's really a lot of fun to see what the person next to you has been shooting, and you're like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? It happens all the time. So I put this. So this was my contribution to the laptop gallery, and then I put it to music, which is a piece written and performed by my younger brother. So just enjoy this, and then we'll start getting into nuts and bolts. This is a royal albatross that nests in New Zealand. Commerson's dolphin. Albatross. Sometimes you have to show your mistakes. Light. That's a wet landing. The males are 4 tons, 8,000 pounds. Macaroni penguin coming out of the water. The rainbow lasted an hour and a half. A Delhi penguin. Snow petrel. Remind me to tell you the story of this chin strap. So slow shutter speed. These people are stuck, won't make the brochure. So doing a short slideshow like that, it's a very effective way, especially to music, is an effective way to share your pictures from your voyages. And there's, how many people here use Macs? And then PCs? Oh, it's about half and half. On the Mac side, iPhoto makes it very easy to combine a slideshow with your music library. PCs, ProShow, was it? ProShow Gold would be, I guess, the best.
Do you use Aperture?
No. It's probably the only Apple thing I don't use. I use Lightroom. Just because Adobe Photoshop, they're kind of the leaders. And I wasn't convinced that Apple would stick with it. I'm still not convinced. I mean, it's not their flagship product, you know. All right, so the impact of the still image. Let's keep talking photography. You remember, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words? The original saying actually came from an article about advertising in the 1920s, and it was one look is worth 1,000 words. And realizing the impact of the still image. And if you sit here right now and think about the still images that you remember, it's not moving pictures that you remember, it's that one image that you could, from Life magazine or National Geographic, that you could stare at and spend time with. Some examples in my life are is the Earthrise from the moon, the Apollo program. My dad worked for Grumman out in Bethpage, Long Island, on the lunar module, the LEM, and so I was just captivated by everything space. And I remember having this as a poster in my bedroom. When I started in photography, I started with 4x5 cameras out in Utah. That's where I kind of cut my teeth in photography. And this is Ansel Adams, of course, Moonrise over Hernandez. I live in New Mexico now. There's a trailer park right here. The trees are grown up. This view doesn't exist anymore. And this image had a lot of impact on me. And I couldn't figure out how he got that sky so dark, but turns out that Ansel Adams manipulated his pictures in the darkroom. He made some parts brighter and some parts darker, which is what we do now, you know, on our own in Lightroom, right? Or Aperture, or iPhoto. Eddie Adams shot from the Vietnam War, right? That had a big impact on people. This is actually a still frame taken from a moving, but it's the 1974 Beautiful America campaign, or America the Beautiful campaign, but the Crying Indian, you know, another one that stuck with us, and then of course Steve McCurry's Afghan Girl. So these are all, with that one exception, still images, and of course now think about this one, which is a composite that Apple uses as the screensaver that comes on your iPhone, right? It's out in the public domain, but my God, what, to just think about what this photo really represents. Where are we? Probably, well, there's Long Island. I mean, this is where is Long Island there? Somewhere there, is there under the cloud? I don't know if that's the Cape Cod or what, but just to see your own planet. So images, still images. And to think about the impact of a still image, for me, takes the pressure off. One thing is that my camera shoots video, but I'm a still photographer. And yes, I want to start shooting more video, but I just can't do both. The projects that I have that incorporate video, I work with a 20-something, right? These kids that have come up with it. But it takes the pressure off you because you're not looking for 1,000 images from your trip. You're looking for 30 or 40 that can tell your story. At Geographic, you shoot 15,000 pictures for a story, and they run 8 to 12 of them. Only 12 pictures, and you shot 10,000. So it's finding those pictures that mean something. So let's talk about travel photography in this digital world of ours now. This thing's just not working. This is the way I feel when I try to go on vacation. Laptop, iPod, iPad, drives. I don't take a portable scanner. Chargers, yeah, and then I'm ready. Then I'm ready to go. It all fits in that bag over there. So the great thing about digital, is that we no longer had to carry film through the airports, but now we have all this stuff. But imagine now, if you will, for a second, your life without your computer, which you're already probably thinking, well, I have an iPad, I can do without my computer, right? Or your iPhone or your smartphone. But I wouldn't want to go back at this point, at least with what I do in my profession. Once I'm not so driven, then I might transition. But the cell phone, can you imagine? Of course, it's being taken to the next level now with being connected. And then a digital camera, which now is combining now with the cell phone. The cell phones now are just killing. Be interesting to walk out here and find out, are people really buying small cameras anymore, or are they just upgrading their phones? So it's here to stay. I don't have to convince anyone about the digital age. But travel and photography just goes together. You want to record your experiences. You want to share them with others. That's the endeavor in Antarctica. For photographers traveling, and this is where we get into this debate, especially with the normal people that say, oh my God, you're missing everything because you're looking through the viewfinder. For me, and maybe for you, I am more in the moment. I'm more focused when I have my camera, when I'm looking for images. And I'm always looking for images. It's just kind of the way I am. I'm a visual person looking at the light. So I'm studying the light. With wildlife, studying the behavior. If I was, it would be hard for me not to have my camera. It's just who I am. So it helps me be in the moment, and it's really become on our trips, the people who thank us about the photography after they learn just the few bells and whistles on their camera. They say, "Wow, I'm just looking at the world in a whole new way, anticipating when a polar bear might jump." Just documenting your own experiences. This is where I wish I would have given my camera to other people and to have my picture taken. I'm always behind the camera. But there's a lot of great situations now where we're sharing images, we're documenting someone else's experience, and then we share them on little jump drives and whatnot. The thrill of instant feedback. It's like magic just to click the shutter and see the picture. And this is making us better photographers faster. We can actually teach someone how to use, they come on board or they come to a workshop, even though we say, please practice with your camera, and it's like, I don't even know it takes a memory card sometimes. But in a couple of days, they can be shooting, seeing the results, and listening to the few rules of composition and making much better images just in a very short time because of that instant feedback. Are any of you printing your work? So now you can make better prints than you could get from your custom labs at home on printers. Of course, the whole fine-tuning of printing is a whole nother workshop, right? And then the digital nightmare, just having the bag of stuff. So you got to get organized. So this is one picture, and then still talking about the digital world, that one of my images that gets accused of being photoshopped, that I put the penguin in that situation. So I like to tell the story. So it comes down to the ethics. There are a lot of photographers who are, creating their images. They're taking the perfect iceberg, the perfect penguin, and putting them together and calling them real. And I mean, what you want to do with your own photography, that's fine. I mean, cutting and pasting and doing all that, that's great. Just don't pass it off as a real shot. And here's a situation where it was a couple years ago, where an iceberg was beached on the shore. It was stranded on shore, and these Adelie penguins were using it like a jungle gym. And so there was a photo expedition, so a number of us just kind of sat down and just watched what's going on. And sometimes it takes time, especially out in nature, to kind of see what's going on. What is the essence of this situation? Are penguins coming and going? What's going on? How are the birds flying? And anytime you can get a situation where you have repeated behavior, you have a chance of photographing it. And I missed the jump. The first 3 jumps I totally missed. The first time I said, oh my God, look, they're coming up to this diving board and they're going to jump. It was kind of like a game. And the guy behind was like, come on, get going, nudging the next guy along. So they started doing it. And so I could pre-focus, put my camera at f8. There's that saying, f8 and B there, your camera's sharpest at f8. So if all things being equal, if you just set your camera to f8, you're good. And I shoot aperture priority, and we'll talk more about settings or modes. So I pre-focused right there, and if you can lock the focus, and then wait for him to jump. And then put it on a rapid fire or burst mode, and get the sequence. And so this is the horizontal one I got. So that's the real image, but of course, so here's the settings, f8 at 2,000th of a second, ISO 200. So there's lots of light down there in Antarctica, in this case. So it became the cover for my book. But you don't know what's going to happen in advertising. This is the same shot. So this is why I get busted. There's the real shot. So our marketing department put blue sky behind it. So anything goes, I guess, in advertising, so you just have to be careful. Although I've been getting on our own marketing department about making composite images. It's one thing to make, the sky blue, but so here's another situation where this is a shot I made on film probably about the year 2000, and there to shoot. We were just starting to go to Antarctica then as a company, and so I was there to shoot the ship. The original name for the ship, though, was actually the Caledonian Star, and when I was taking this photograph, it was the Caledonian Star. Now it's the Endeavour, and now it's National Geographic. So there are things that happen behind the scenes, but when it was used as a cover for Geographic Expedition, it didn't even have the name of the ship on it.
Ralph, I just wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
just to tell you about the chin strap penguin.
Oh yes, thank you. That chin strap, the little time lapse. You know how your dog recognizes you? You might come along and recognize you and then come bounding over. So I'm just kind of sitting down shooting these penguins. There was a little highway where they were walking up the chin straps until this one penguin just kind of stops and looks at me and then just hopped off his trail. And so he'd take 3 steps and hop. And he's like bounding over to me. Like, it was almost like, take my picture, or who are you? And he's like, take my picture. And so I just kept shooting. I took about, I think that sequence was 24 shots. And I can shoot 8 frames a second. So it was like 3 seconds. And it just made a nice little, and then he just came over and he just stopped and he just looks at me. Okay, shoot. And he gave me a couple of minutes and then just walked on. So it was pretty funny. So here is a shot in the morning. This has been used in the brochures, and I've always worried about this, this how this guy merges into the other one when it was put in the brochure. And this is where digital is dangerous. So those are my settings, f2.8, sunrise. The ship's faced the other way, and that little guy's out of there. So these are the decisions that you have to make in your own work. Are you going to add and subtract? And in commercial work, I don't have a problem with it. It's just when you pass it off as real, and when it starts showing up in Audubon calendars and National Wildlife calendars. So that's just it's just something that what can we believe anymore? And these are just some other examples of just shots that are used in our advertising. So we're always looking for images that are engaging, and it's the power of the single image. Looking at the camera, for example, with a reflection. This is one actually that goes back to film, and it's not on ice, it's on a sandy beach in the Falklands, king penguins. Using a geographic. Of course, that yellow square wasn't there when I took the shot. Yellow rectangle, excuse me. This was a shot from a few years back where Sven Lindblad, the owner and founder of the company, said, "For God's sake, can we get a heroic shot of this ship?" It's kind of the way he hands out his assignments. And I said, "Of course, yes, sir, I'll do my best." And we had this killer, just glass morning, and we dropped a Zodiac and got all the well-dressed people out on deck of the ship and photographed it going through the Lemaire Channel. And these are just fun moments that happen. I'm down on the ice. We're testing the ice before letting our guests walk out on the ice, and everyone's kind of looking down at me. I said, "Oh, spread out a little bit. Look down on me, and please don't wave for just one shot." And then, of course, wildlife shots are always used. So so look at the difference between this one. You shoot a sharp picture, and then you have low light. You're struggling to get sharp pictures, so just work with the blur. Work with the blur. And you just need one or two dolphins that are sharp or read to your eye quickly as dolphins, and it works. And then anytime you have something leaping or coming at the camera. This is from our Arctic trip in the Russian Arctic. So in our photography, it all starts with this passion. Again, why are you guys here today? And yesterday I spoke to over 300 people in Washington, D.C. during the Jets Redskins game. These people chose to come to a lecture. I guess it has to do with maybe the Redskins record in D.C. But this passion to get out in nature, to get out there with your camera, to photograph, to record things, and then to share. And I think that's really the power of digital now, how we can share. I took a picture, a little stitch with my iPhone of the B&H store before coming in the door, and then emailed it and said in photographer's heaven. So I'm just sharing the fact that I'm here. So I wanted to just share some other pictures before we continue building on this theme. I went up to Denali before one of our Alaska trips, and the color's a little funky coming off on the projector here. We do it as a pre-trip to Alaska voyage, where we start in Sitka and take the entire inside passage down to Seattle. And this was late August, which was the perfect time to be there because it's fall, there's fresh snow, and the tundra is just going ballistic in terms of its color. So just share a few images. The blueberries, you can eat your way. So what you do is you find a good macro subject, like these blueberries, shot with a macro lens. I'm putting a little bit, have you seen these light panel? I'm not talking about a fill flash, but there are these little attachments that are light panel. It's like this is a light panel, but it's just like a quarter of it. It's an LED light that you can turn up and down. And I'm using that just to add a little bit more light on a gray day. You don't know I'm doing it, but it punches the colors and emphasizes the blue of the blueberries, and then you make the photo and then you eat them.
Are you?
So the shot's never to be repeated.
Are you using the LED light off camera or?
Yeah, off camera. I'm probably holding it. Let's see. I guess I was holding it to the left.
How close are you to
Pretty close, because they're pretty small. So it's with my 100 macro, so it's a dedicated macro lens. And then, as you know, as you get closer to something, you have less depth of field to work with. So you need a tripod, you need to stop it down. Minimum f8, but probably f11, f16, and it's still going to be, depth of field is still going to be just millimeters. So macro photography becomes very precise. But that said, your aim and create cameras, your G12s, your, what's the Nikon one? I want to say P7100 or something. I can't remember numbers. These cameras, just the way the optics work with having a small chip, they have incredible depth of field and macro capabilities. So I make a lot of macro shots just using my G12. Also has the swing out screen. We'll talk about equipment here in a little bit. Bunchberry or dwarf dogwood. So again, you're looking to tell a story about this place, so you've got to get all the cast of characters, all the little details. And then if you're lucky enough to get a beautiful bear coming through the fall foliage. The way Denali works for much of the time is that you go out on these little wildlife safaris in a bus. And then there's places where you do go walking. So a lot of times you're shooting on a beanbag out the window in a bus. So you're safe. And then this was leaving the park, again from the bus. These doll sheep were right alongside the road. And then, of course, if the mountain comes out, you shoot the mountain. It took me 4 trips to Denali to even see it. It's only out, they say, less than, 30% of the time. Wonder Lake, the canoes on a frosty morning.
Is that HDR?
No, it's not HDR. HDR is high dynamic range, where you take a series of shots at basically bracketing at different exposure levels, and then in software you combine them. But I guess I do HDR from a single image because I'm going to hold back the sky with a split field neutral density filter, and then work with the different tonal range in Lightroom so that it balances. Because this is in shadow, the mountain has light on it, so how do you balance that? Remember I told you the cameras just can't handle it. So you've got to either use filtration or work on it the Ansel Adams way in the darkroom. And this was a killer day where we had clouds coming over, so it's like a spotlight going across the landscape, and then just these killer reflections. We had 2 unbelievable days where there wasn't any wind until like noon. And on one of those days I got to go, this is my friend Barb, so I said, here, take my hat and sit in the middle of the canoe, and do you mind paddling back and forth a little bit and making ripples? And we went out canoeing after this, and there still wasn't a ripple. It was amazing. And then the weather got interesting later in that day. That was a Monday. Some clouds started coming in, and so I got really interested in trying to get up in a plane with the doors off. Have you ever done that? Go flying in a plane around a 21,000 foot mountain with no door? I've done it a few times now, and it's too exciting. But I felt safe because over my seatbelt, the pilot put some duct tape. Usually you should have a climbing harness so that if something were to happen with turbulence, that you'd stay in the plane. So I don't know how safe that was. But it was just an incredible afternoon because not only we start getting the light in the late afternoon, but the clouds start doing this peekaboo around the mountain. And you can see the glaciers, so it's more than just... Yeah. So again, these are shots that, I've got to hold back the sky relative to the foreground. I was using a polarizer with an image stabilized lens, 24 to 105 lens. Probably shooting at 800 ISO, so I have a fast shutter speed. You want to get at least 1,000th of a second in the air. And then in processing, I've got to put a filter over the sky so that those brighter clouds balance with the foreground. And it's really colorful rocks around the foothills. And then we just have these killer sun rays coming through the end. Okay. Is that enough introduction for you? What time is it, by the way? 10 to 4. Excellent. Any questions before we move on?
Do you use a Wacom tablet? Or do you just...
Yeah, here's a question about working, when I work in Lightroom, do I just use my mouse or do I have a tablet that has a wireless mouse or a pen so that I can do very fine and detailed work in Lightroom or Photoshop? Yes, I do. I use the tablet, but I use the mouse. I can't, there's just something about the ergonomics of holding a pen. I cramp up. I can't do it. I think it's those 12 years of torture in my childhood in school on Long Island and the threat of the SATs. Does anyone grew up in New York and did you have to take the SATs? You know what I'm talking about, right? If it's not on the SAT, I didn't want to know about it. All right, so I handle a lot of the questions that come through Lindblad before people leave on a trip. What camera should I buy? What should my settings be? That's the question in the field. What should my settings be? Which was Isabel's first question. What were your settings? Which was great to try to prompt me to tell you more about the photos. How do I compensate? You know, you have to fool your cameras for snow and ice and also for dark situations. Do I really need my tripod? There's a weight limit, or I hate carrying my tripod. Do I really need my tripod? And how do I transport my gear and protect my gear? The way I want to answer those questions is talk about knowing your camera, how to store your photos, what to pack, talk a little bit about composition, and then talk about practicing. And this is what I'm hoping our marketing of our trips will help do, is that not only to get people to come on our trips, but be prepared for the trip when they get there, because there's nothing worse than someone coming up to me and saying, God, I wish I would have brought my laptop. I would have had a laptop gallery. So what camera should I buy? B&H, here we are. They're all right out the door, right? What is the right camera for you? I mean, I wish I could be totally happy just with a point and shoot or one of these super zoom cameras where I didn't have to change lenses. But I want a little bit more creative control, and I do it professionally, so I need a little larger file, a little more information. And there are these new Micro Four Thirds cameras that are coming out, this new format with the mirrorless system that has interchangeable lenses. It's very light. But there's advantages and disadvantages to all of them, so let's discuss them. And of course, there's the SLRs as well. Well, when you talk about cameras, a lot of folks are very happy with these. This is actually one of the super zooms, but what I love about some of these smaller cameras is that they have the flip out screens, and they're just starting now putting them on SLRs. I know Nikon did it a while ago. Canon now has done it on their 60D, but they're still not on the professional cameras, which frustrates me because you can flip out and you can shoot the camera at any angle. So I wish I could get it to where some of those features, the consumer features, are on the professional cameras. So let's just talk about these point and shoots, or what we call in the business affectionately the aim and create camera. Advantages: it costs less. They're small and lightweight. You can put them in your pocket. I talked about the excellent macro. You can get underwater housings for them, so you don't have to buy the couple $1,000 housing. And it has the flip. Many of them have the flip out LCD, the screen. The disadvantages: shutter lag, but that's going away with some of the new technology now. And then frame rate would be another one. I don't know. I should have probably add that. And the fact that when you go to higher ISOs, you get a lot of noise. That's the big problem, because the chip is so small, the sensor is so small. Limited zoom range, that's changing in some of them as well. So it's really what keeps me from having only a camera like this is the image quality, But that said, it depends on what you're doing with your images. If you're sharing them online, by email, even making your own. Has anyone here made their own online book? Either iPhoto or Shutterfly?
Yeah.
If you haven't, you should, because you'll become a better photographer and you'll edit your work better when you pay $75 to make a book. Your book, right? And these cameras, even you could make a great book with iPhone photos if you know the limitations. Okay, you just can't print the photos too big. So that's a great option. Again, the underwater housings, and I don't know if these current prices are correct, but you're talking about a camera less than $500. It'll shoot raw format, and you can put it in a housing and go snorkeling with sea lions and get really published. I've had images published from my actually D10 going back a couple generations. And if you need, at least, if you take one of these trips, especially where there's going to be snorkeling, you need some kind of camera that'll shoot underwater. Because it's a lot of fun and there's great things happening down there. Galapagos for sure, Baja California. And in places you can even do the Hail Marys where you just put the camera underneath and click, right? And you can get some good shots that way. The new Micro Four Thirds format, I don't know much about them yet. I do know the major limitation is that you're not looking through the lens optically, it's an electronic viewfinder. So there's going to be a little learning curve there to get used to that. But the good news there is when you take the picture, you don't lose the view. Whereas when you have an SLR, it goes and you lose, if you see it in the camera, you missed it. So there's some advantages there. These super zooms now, there's one that's 24 to 840 millimeter equivalent. They're unbelievable. If you can deal with the fact that they don't work as well, and well, the image quality isn't there in really high ISOs, but that's going to probably change. And there is a shutter delay, but that's going away in a lot of these now, and some of them have very high frame rates, 8 frames a second. So there's a couple of different models there to look at. I mean, there's a lot to be said for just having a camera that you can carry with you all the time, and so that you can make pictures. You make the picture. I mean, it's knowing the ins and outs of your camera and knowing its limitations that kind of hold you back. If you don't know your limitations with the cameras, then you're going to always be frustrated. But if you can use, there's times that these cameras, it's all you need. And here's one, the Lumix, that's 25 to 600 millimeters, and it's $400 and 11 frames per second. This is the one I could find that had the fastest frame rate. So it's a legitimate wildlife camera for Africa, for Antarctica, for Baja California, for Galapagos. So here is the alternative, right? A 500 millimeter lens, up there in the Arctic, trying to get pictures of polar bears, and then, the wife standing next to him just goes, click, got it, dear. Did you get it? So the advantages of these big cameras, of course, is they have more lens choices, the higher image quality, but you're dealing faster frame rate, no shutter lag, but you're dealing with spending a lot more money and carrying all that gear around. So the choice is yours. Of course, you have this whole range of lenses, and these are just most of the lenses that I have. And here's that 70 to 300. I think I actually have a slide coming up. This is the flip out screen on the 60D. So you have an 18 megapixel camera, flip out LCD screen, 5 frames a second, which is holding its own there. $1,000. Now it'll be obsolete in a year. That little red light, when you click the camera and there's that little red light, you think it's processing, it's saying upgrade, upgrade, upgrade.
What will it be replaced with in a year?
I guess the 70D. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, prior higher ISO capabilities, but it's a great little camera. I think it's better on the Canon side. It's better than getting a Rebel because it has the thumb. One control is a thumb wheel, and so when I talk about exposure compensation, you've got the wheel at the top of the camera that does your f-stop when you're in aperture priority, and then to change your exposure, it's just the thumb wheel, up, plus, minus, plus, minus. Whereas on the Rebels and many of the Nikons, you have to push a button then hit another button to go plus or minus, whereas here you just. So this is that L series 70 to 300, $1,500, sharp, small, light. I did a trip earlier this year to Botswana where there was a 40-pound weight limit, and that's the longest lens I took. So I had 2 camera bodies. I had my 24 to 105 and that 70 to 300. And if you get sharp pictures, you can crop with the amount of information that comes out of an 18 megapixel camera. You can do pretty aggressive crops.
How does that compare to the 70 to 200 f4?
F4, in quality,
In terms of sharpness?
I would say it's right up there. I would challenge anyone to tell the difference. Yeah, it's so good that I'm thinking I have a 70 to 200 2.8 with a 1.4 converter on it, which is it's tack sharp, and I'm thinking of selling them. Anyone want to buy it? Yeah. So yeah, no, it's amazing.
What's the difference between these two lenses? The L series?
Yeah, that's a good question. The speed of autofocus, this probably has plastic in it. That's probably all metal. So it's durability and optics. It's going to be sharper, faster focusing than the lower end or consumer lens. So what camera should you buy? I mean, that's the question. You do want to go out and handle them and look at them, and of course we're in the Superstore to do that. So these are kind of just some suggestions, and I mean I know G12 is the latest. I don't know what on the Lumix if they have another model yet. And I do shoot Canon, so I don't have the Nikon numbers down, but there's always they're kind of parallel to each other. You just figure out the price range, and you can go, what is it, the D7000 would be about $1,000 body, great camera as well. And then, of course, there's your iPhone, which will shoot HD video and HDR, high dynamic range pictures. Of course, you don't have the zoom range and things like that, but seeing more and more people, they're very happy just being out there. They're light, everyone's down there, hunkered down, and they're standing there videoing the whole thing just with their iPhone, getting very acceptable stuff. All right, so on the what should my settings be? So this comes to where you need to know your camera. You know what shooting mode you want to be in, the white balance, the fact that you can control ISO, and that you can manipulate your exposure compensation. Any questions? No, yeah, when you see how easy it is, you can't tell anyone because then we'll lose our whole workshop business. Shooting modes, I break them down into the auto modes, the creative modes, and the scene modes. You've probably heard those terms before. So when you look at your dials and many of your cameras, auto, boom, the green square. Everything is automatic. You can't change the ISO, the camera does it. Can't control your f-stop, can't control your shutter speed. The camera is making all the decisions for you. And in most situations, you can be very happy with that. The camera will do a great job. But there's situations where you need to capture fast-moving subjects. So you can go to the Running Man sports mode. On some cameras, it's the kids and pets. Portrait. What does the portrait mode do? Shoot with a shallower depth of field to help blur the background. So it'll change your f-stop. Landscape will give you more depth of field. So you can layer your pictures and get foreground and sharp focus. Low light enables slower shutter speeds. And of course, macro will enable you to focus closely. I mean, this is pretty obvious stuff. But if all those features work, why even go the next step to these? My name is Ralph, and I am an aperture priority shooter. I think in terms of depth of field first. What is the range of focus, or depth of focus, you can think about it that way, the depth of focus in the picture. What do I want? Just your face sharp and everyone else blurry behind you? Or I could blur you and get the next gentleman, the next row. These are creative choices, right? You can play on depth of field. That's something in this two-dimensional medium of photography. You're trying to add depth and interest to a photo, and we do that with depth of field. So with aperture priority, you're controlling the f-stop, and then the camera sets the shutter speed. Shutter priority, the flip side. Okay? Program, you have some control where you can change the f-stop and the camera match the shutter speed, and it depends on the camera how much control you have, but you might be forced into auto ISO still in program. You just have to look at your camera to see what you can control, but a lot of times program's a good way to go. Just put it on P and shoot. Manual, of course, is where you do everything manual, and there are situations where you might want to think about that. The scene modes, there's usually another layer to menu settings. Yes, question?
Of all the images you've shown today, what proportion of those were aperture priority?
Of all the images I have shown today, what percentage of those are aperture priority? And I'm going to say probably 80%. I'm 80% aperture priority, and then when I'm doing motion, I'll go to, especially if I know what's working for me, if a 1/15 of a second's working for me, I'll switch to shutter priority and set it on 1/15. And then, so I'd say 10% shutter priority and then 10% manual.
And you don't feel any forfeiture of control?
No, because I know how to tweak it. When it comes down to it, it's the same buttons doing it just in a different way. Because when I'm in aperture priority, and we'll talk more about it in a second, because I have some other slides that will speak to that. So there's another layer in many of these aim and creates, super zooms, where you get to these scene modes. Okay? And so that's where you get to kids and pets. I mean, and of course it depends on the camera whether you have it on a dial or you have to get to scene modes. So aperture priority, and so this is what what I'm talking about when I'm shooting a landscape. I'm going to decide, and I want to be at f/22 or f/16, f/11 to make a shot like this where I have the cactus in the foreground in sharp focus, and then it falls off into the background, but it's acceptable focus all the way through. You know, the classic calendar-looking landscape shots. And so I'm controlling the f-stop. The camera's going to set the shutter speed. So how do I set exposure? That's with exposure compensation. That's the other dial. So I'm setting exposure. But what happens when I go -1 or +1? What's the camera doing? Changing the shutter speed. So it's just a dial. We call it exposure compensation, but it's just tuning in to change the shutter speed, but it's working on a stop basis. The reason why it works for me is that if I have a scene here where I know that I want to be -2/3, even if the light value changes going from right to left, as I follow a bird, for example, I'm always going to be -2/3. Whereas if I was in manual and things were changing quickly like that, I might be off. Yes?
When you're shooting a picture like this, you're in manual focus?
In this one I probably am in manual focus, or, well, let me think back.
To the right where you have it.
Yeah. Well, I should tell you the way I focus. This is a great question. How do I focus? Because with your cameras, most of your cameras are set up to, when you press that shutter finger, the shutter button, you're focusing, right? And then if you hold it down halfway, it locks both focus and exposure. I have trained myself to use the back button. I focus with my thumb. So I can walk up here and go focus, 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 check my focus. Now I can move the camera, click, 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 and it'll never change focus. But when I'm working on a tripod like this, actually the way I work now in digital is I'll actually use live view with manual focus. Look at my live view and use that as a loop. And I can hit a button 2 times and now it's 10x. And so I can choose where I want to focus and then make my picture. That's a great question. So that's why I think in terms of aperture priority. I'm controlling what's sharp, or what's in focus, where my focus point is. Whereas shutter priority, of course, to shoot a slow shutter speed, and this is a reason why when people say, well, can't you do the same thing and just keep it in shutter priority? At least in aperture priority, if I put it at f8, it will always give me a shutter speed that will work. Now, it may be blurry if it's too dark, right? If I'm shooting at f8 and it's I go outside at night and try to take pictures, I might be shooting at a second, but it'll work. It'll give me a combination. Whereas with shutter priority, if we go out right now on the street in the bright sunlight and say I want to shoot at a sixth of a second, it won't work. You know, it's blown out. I mean, there's not an f-stop that can close down tight enough to limit the light to get you to a sixth of a second without using filtration, right? Without putting on an ND filter. But when there's situations where I know I can get down to a 15th or 30th of a second, I'm panning. You know, if we go out on the street at twilight here and practice panning with taxi cabs going by, you know, choosing the hybrids, you know, they showed a hybrid taxi cab in New York with motion blur. We can say, okay, a 30th of a second, you know, works, or a 60th of a second seems to work, and then you can just keep it on the 60th and bang, 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 and just keep working with that, so that you can keep your shutter speed the same. And then there's one more thing we're working on, the National Geographic modes. Where you see a polar bear, just flip at the polar bear. Of course, this is a joke. I'm sure people are calling out from my seminar yesterday, asking B&H when the National Geographic mode camera is coming out. So at least if you go to the program icons, if you're fairly new to this, or you don't want to deal with all the other stuff I was talking about, you can just go to those program icons. And for 80% of the people that are new to digital, or even new to photography, just thinking about Running Man versus landscape versus portrait, the results jump a couple of notches. But as you get into it more and more, you're going to realize, hey, I want to get it to f/22. I want to shoot into the sun and get a sun star. And then you're going to go to aperture priority. Or I want to shoot blurry pictures on purpose. I want to shoot at a 30th of a second, and you'll experiment with shutter priority. Okay. Oh, the situations where I go to manual, think about, let's say, a snowy egret against sitting on a tree, on a snag with a shaded background, with a dark background. So you have a white bird against a black background with a sunbeam on it, with a sun ray on it. It'd be very hard to shoot just using exposure compensation to get stopped down enough to underexpose that scene enough with your normal settings to not blow out the bird. So you may have to go to manual and then meter on the bird, or take a series of shots underexposing the scene so that you don't blow out the white feathers on the bird. So we're going to talk about how the camera sees light, and the camera tries to make everything medium gray. So if it has if it's dark and black, it will overexpose. So you have to darken down. So you darken on or underexpose dark scenes. And the opposite's true. It tries to make what is white or bright medium gray. So you have to add light to light. You have to purposely fool your camera to overexpose a white or bright scene. So you should experiment with these, you know, go out and do your own practice assignments if you're not that far along. White balance, another setting. This is very important if you're shooting in JPEG. It's basically two capture formats, JPEG and RAW. In JPEG, your camera is processing those pictures for you. So the settings, especially color balance, this is like the style of film. They're almost like color correction filters between daylight, shade, and cloudy. What white balance you set on, you know, like if you were shooting in here to get this light the way I look to your eyes, if you shot on auto white balance, the camera would look at the scene, recognize what type of light it is, and then compensate so it looks like it looks to our eyes. If you were to shoot it on daylight balanced white balance, it'd probably look very, very orange. Okay? So we'll talk about that. So it's important to set your white balance. And this is another reason to get off auto, because auto will also have auto white balance. And there's times when you want to control your white balance. And here's one of those times. You're in Antarctica and everything's blue and white and black. You shoot it on daylight, that's very faithful. It looks at the scene, picks out what's white, and then balances it around for that daylight 5500 Kelvin daylight setting. Okay, that's the color of light, or the warmth of light is measured in degrees Kelvin, being 5500 being daylight. as you're in situations where there's more and more blue, a cloudy day where the warm wavelengths are being filtered out by the atmosphere, or you're in the shade in the side of these buildings with a blue sky. Remember what ectochrome used to look like? Very blue film, if you can think back that far. We used to use color correction filters to filter out or correct for that blue. You can think of color temperature in that way, like a color correction filter. So cloudy is trying to correct for the blue, in this case in the ice. Shade is even a step further, so you can see how it kind of muddies the color. There's a color cast to it. So that's what the camera is trying to do with white balance. But you can use it to your advantage, because when you have it in auto, remember that it'll look at a scene and it'll probably think of it in terms of daylight, and it will take out any color and keep the blue. Which means if you have a colorful scene, it might be counteracting that beautiful sunset or sunrise or the beautiful red rocks of Utah by having your camera in auto white balance. So many of us will shoot, even in a daylight scene, in cloudy to punch the color. Okay? So here's a situation again where you have a lot of blue and an Alaskan glacier with daylight, using the daylight, and that's the faithful rendition, 5,500 degrees Kelvin. It's not going to process out the blue, whereas if we take the same shot, or in this case process the shot in Lightroom with shade, it's taking out that blue and changing it. I don't know if you've ever had trouble with your lab. You shot a whole roll of film, and then you got to process it, and the colors were all off because they took one reference frame and then processed the whole roll based on that reference frame, or printed that whole roll.
Are you shooting a JPEG?
I'm shooting RAW. Yeah, I shoot RAW because when you shoot in RAW format, yes, it takes up more memory space, but I have more control. When I go into processing my images, and it's very quick now in these programs, iPhoto, Picasa, Lightroom, to make JPEGs.
Yeah.
So for a while, many of us shot both RAW and JPEG, so we had a kind of like a proof of what it should look like. But I mean, I couldn't keep track of 2 shots of the same thing because I'd always work on the RAW, and then where was that other JPEG in my workflow? It was always somewhere else, and I didn't really need it. So yeah, I'm shooting RAW. But I wouldn't convince you to shoot RAW unless you see the reason to shoot RAW. As long as you're right on or close in your exposures, and you pay attention to white balance, you can still make tweaks in iPhoto, Picasa, Lightroom, Aperture. You just can't take things as far. You can't recover blown out scenes, for example, like you can when you shoot in RAW and the camera is not processing it. If you want a life, shoot JPEG. White balance is also important when you go underwater, and that's where I will put it on auto, because I do want the camera to process out that real blue look to it as you get deeper and then lose light. Or there's also an underwater scene mode setting, as you know in many of your aim and creates. So tips: get it off the auto white balance for many of the scenes. And I forgot to mention the times I do use auto other than underwater, and that goes back a couple, sorry, is when you have mixed light sources, street scenes, indoors. The camera does a very good job of reading the light. So daylight, again, with, I guess my spots are probably tungsten, so it's counteracting for all that blue that it should look like in tungsten and making it yellow, right? Which is a look you may want in some situations, but most of the time you want to be faithful to the light sources. And yes, the walls of my studio are medium 18% gray, so that I'm not, because I'm working on my computers, I don't want any other hues bouncing around in my space. So turn it off auto, shoot daylight most of the time, especially for truer colors when you want those blues, and then switch to cloudy when you want warmer, when you want to warm up scenes, or if it is cloudy. And then of course the next would follow that. If you're shooting in the shade, you'd want to go to shade. And it's real important with portraits, right? You may not want to be on cloudy or have your camera interpreting the light as cloudy with portraits because you don't want people looking sunburnt, right? So you want to get back to a faithful or daylight or even auto, depending on what the light situation is. All right, so a good practice assignment for that is just to take one scene and compare results. And so as you're experimenting with white balance, if this is new to you, go out and shoot the same scene in different white balance settings. And if you shoot JPEG, you should do this as natural course anyway. Just give yourself the choice, especially if something good is happening. Shoot it in many different ways so you have the choice. Again, we can process with a raw photo, since it's not processed by the camera, I can go into my pictures and make them any color balance I want, any white balance I want, and then process it, right? And make a new file. Controlling ISO. ISO is a creative control now. We're not stuck with 100 ISO film. So when you need more speed to get a sharp shot, crank up your ISO. Don't worry about the noise. If you're going for a sharp photo, get a sharp photo, and then you can process out the noise if you have to. All right? If you get a blurry shot and not intentionally or artistically blurred, what do you do with it? You delete it, right? So why not use ISO? Especially low light conditions, obviously, and you want to freeze action. So I will crank my ISO up to where I need it. You know, in this case, I have a 2.8 lens, and I could have gone higher. I mean, I'm shooting at a 30th of a second. Sometimes I'm going for a little bit of motion, you know, so I could go up to, and this is 3 or 4 years ago, so I don't know what camera this was with. It might have been with the original 5D, but I could easily, with the 5D Mark II, go to 1600 and have the same amount of noise. The upgrades in the high ISO shooting in the last couple of years have been amazing, and this is where Nikon is probably the leader right now in high noise shooting. So here's a 1600 ISO shot with the 5D Mark II. Full moon, clouds moving, a 30-second exposure on a tripod, f4, so wide open on my, this would be my 24-105 lens. And then I'm painting. Have you ever done this where this is where digital is fun and you can experiment. So I'm opening the shutter for 30 seconds on a tripod and then taking a flashlight.
It's a fresh, it's a fresh shadow.
What's that now? Yeah. So here's the.
Because the sun is.
Yeah, this isn't sun. This is painting. So I actually had a partner painting, so he must have been standing to my right, so it cast that shadow.
Okay.
Very observant. So these are the type of things you can do when you work with your ISO. I cranked up the ISO, held it open to 30 seconds. So you want to use the lowest, because of the noise factor, use the lowest ISO for the situation. So most of the time, 200. I think Nikon, that's where you bottom out, is at 200 in most cameras, without going to another setting. Canon, I think by default we can go to 100, but I'm typically on 200. If I'm hand holding on a moving platform, then I'm on 400, like on a ship or a Zodiac. If it starts really bouncing and the light starts dropping, I go to 800. So I have no qualms from going 400 to 800, especially for shooting wildlife. But I'm going down to Costa Rica in February in the rainforest. I'm going to be shooting at 1600 probably, right? And I'm looking forward to that. I haven't been there. Last time I was there was 3 camera generations ago. Any questions on ISO? So again, the dark side of higher ISO is that net noise factor, and this is where the software, you always preach, get the best photo in the moment in the situation, so you get a good sharp photo to work with, and don't try to fix it in Photoshop. But this is one of the things where you can do amazing things with lowering noise with your software.
Would that be one where you would shoot that in RAW?
Yeah, if you're in a situation, where you're going to get noise, go ahead and switch your camera to RAW, especially for nights, low light shooting. Christmas is coming, shooting the Christmas trees at twilight,
Does Lightroom fix that?
Lightroom, especially Lightroom 3, has a very good noise reduction software.
Because I've been doing a lot of low light shooting,
Mhm.
and noise is something that
Yeah,
It's a problem.
yeah, it is a problem. What camera are you shooting with?
I have a Canon 20D, weighs about 1,000 pounds.
All right, so you have a big issue because you need to go out that door and go down to the Canon desk and get the 60D, because the 20D was a great camera
Right.
5 years ago. And you know, and it's not just the megapixel issue, it's the chip and the noise capability.
Is the 60 smaller, lighter?
No, it's probably about the same size, but it's the flip out screen, and it's just leaps and bounds in terms of the noise, especially if you're shooting low light. But just think of all the money you save because you didn't go 30D, 40D, 50D, right? You jumped 20 to 60, and I really envy that. So you know about the different sizes of the sensors, right? There's a reason we go to the full frame big sensors because the light gathering spots are larger, right? You can fit more megapixels in a bigger area because when you have to pack so many pixels into these smaller sensors and then amplify the signal because of their light gathering capabilities, that's where the noise comes from. And if you don't know what noise is, it's that speckling. You typically see it in darker areas of your frame. So this is why it's important to have a properly exposed photo, and in digital, we're going to talk about exposure here in a second. You got to shoot the pictures bright. You don't underexpose in digital. You have to shoot them bright because if you're always lightening or brightening your photos, you are increasing noise, right? Whatever inherent noise is there, you're like amplifying it in your processing. So another little practice assignment for you is yeah, go out there and play. Figure out what the capabilities are of your camera regarding to noise and how it changes with your ISO. Very simple little experiments, you know, with the same scene, just shoot it in different ways and you'll find where your comfort level is in quality and then where you need to get to, for example, in your low light shooting, where you need to be. With the 20D, you get much over 400 ISO and you're talking about the Milky Way. The 60D could probably have the same noise at 1600, I would estimate. Sold. That's right. Christmas is coming. How many days? I haven't even started. Okay, so how do you adjust exposure for snow and ice? Winter is coming. And this is where we want to get into exposure compensation and how your camera sees light and how we compensate. So now if we were talking the old days, I'd have my handheld light meter. I'd look at a scene and I'd think about what is middle toned. Remember, your cameras, when it's telling you it's the right exposure, it thinks it's gray, 18% gray. That's why we took a gray card. In the light we're going to shoot in, you could meter on that card and then take that card away and take a picture of a white flower in the same light, and it wouldn't be overexposed or underexposed. It would be properly exposed. So we'd look at a scene out in nature and we'd find green grass, maybe a flesh tone or a middle blue sky, take the light reading off that, set our camera to those settings, shoot away, bracket, a third of a stop either way, and be in the ball game. All right? But now we're using these automatic cameras, right? All this sophisticated matrix and evaluative metering that's looking at the scene and evaluating how do we change the exposure when we're in an automatic setting like aperture or shutter priority. And the way we do that is with this compensation. And I was telling you about going plus or adding light to light for bright scenes and darkening down or going minus, purposely underexposing. So this is what your camera wants to do. It wants to see the snow here is gray, right? It's underexposed. This is what the camera thought was the right exposure for the polar bear leaping across the ice in the Arctic. All right? You've got to fool your camera. Sometimes on cloudy days, depending on how white or gray the ice is, stop and a half, 2 stops to get the brighter or whiter snow. Okay? Not all snow is white though, so you have to be careful. Yes, hi.
Do you use bracketing at all?
I don't use the automatic bracketing function nor do I teach using it. to start out with because it takes that out of the equation, out of figuring out what the proper exposure is. So for example, if I would have used, I'm going to shoot 8 frames a second on that polar bear jumping with a bracketing, auto bracketing, which means every time I hold down the trigger, it'll take 3 shots. Or you can do it, you can some cameras you can set for more, but it's going to take 3 shots, and I can set it to be one's right on, one's -1, one's +1. So in this situation, I might blow out, or the best leap might not be properly exposed, right? So for wildlife, it's not a good thing to do anyway. Where this bracketing is coming into play now is with HDR, right? We want to put our camera on a tripod, set our parameters and go click, 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 and take different exposures of the same scene and then use software to combine them. And if we teach bracketing, especially you know, with up-and-coming photographers, then we're not tuned in as much to thinking, okay, does this scene need to be minus, or does this scene need to be plus, and how much? And so I think bracketing comes in once the auto bracketing comes in much when you know what you're doing, rather than trying.
Something like this, there's also the payoff that if you really want to make sure you get something, but you can set your bracket, you can auto bracket, you can overexpose first as your starting point.
Right. No. Exactly. Yeah, that's true, but.
Chances a little bit, although you're losing that moment, maybe.
Yeah, you're losing the moment. That's the problem here. And in a situation like this, you have time. We're coming up, usually what happens is, okay, there's a polar bear out ahead of the ship and we all are coming out, and I will go out, and this is the way you work. You come out and you take a test frame. This is where digital's amazing. I take a Polaroid basically of the scene. I mean, the bear's too far away. I'll just burn a couple of shots, and I'm going to talk about the digital light meter. What's the digital light meter called? The histogram. I've got a device that's going to count the tonal range and all those pixels, so I can put my highlight peak to the right, in the right-hand third, and then shoot away with abandon. So it's a good question. In this case, I wouldn't do that. So we go the other way, and we have the dark iguana on the dark rocks. What does the camera try to do? It tries to brighten it. It's just trying to. So you have to darken down. So you have to purposely underexpose a dark shot, and this is what gets people. It's counterintuitive, right? You think, oh, it's dark. I got to add more light, but your camera wants to make it already gray. So you get into a situation like this, and you can think about this as, okay, so we have dark foreground with these iguanas and a bright sky in the Galapagos. Or you can say, walk out on the shady side of the building, dark foreground with the, I don't know what building would be in the distance, with the Empire State Building there in the sun in the distance, and you can't balance the two. So the camera is going to, in this case, try to overexpose the dark foreground at the expense of brightening the sky. So you've got to purposely underexpose. And then if you have a scene that has a dramatic contrast, so it's even brighter than that, you may have to put a filter over the sky or work with it in post-production if you really want to get that shot. Or you find subjects that are evenly lit. Or you just shoot the iguanas and you don't worry about the sky. I mean, you can choose, you can figure out what works, but it's learning how the camera sees. Your photography will jump a couple of notches once you learn how the camera sees light, and that you just can't walk up and shoot something in the dark shade and include the bright skyline in the same shot without compensating in some way. So it sees the light as middle gray. Bright scenes tend to be underexposed. Dark scenes tend to be overexposed. So I hope that's helpful for you. So the way we do it, the way we fool the camera when we're not in manual mode, is with our exposure compensations, that little plus minus symbol. And what we're doing is shifting the histogram. Okay? And so most of our cameras have this dial, or the steps, usually in a third of a stop. And so to the right is plus, to the left typically is minus. And if your camera isn't set up so that when you go to the right, I think some cameras out of the factory, I think Nikon used to do that, When you went left, it was really plus, and when you went right, it was really minus. So you could set it up in the custom function so that when you go to the right, you're going plus, and when you go to the left, so it'll make more sense to you. If you're dyslexic, good luck. So the way I do it, when we're talking about this, I'll meter on the scene. I mean, I'll go out there and I'll look at it and see what's going on, see where my values lie. Do I need more shutter speed or less shutter speed to be sharp? Where do I want my f-stop? I'll shoot a test image. I'll look at the LCD, the histogram on the LCD, and then I'll adjust accordingly. So, but we haven't talked about the histogram yet. And I'm wondering if I actually included that in this talk. Do I need to review that for folks? Does anyone have questions on histogram? You guys are good? Speak up. All right. Let me just go back for a second because I just want to highlight peak. So this is right as white, and there's 256 tonal variations from black on the left, gray in the middle. So this would be your gray card to white on the right. And it's this highlight peak that you worry about. If this highlight peak, if you're shooting snow and it's over in the center, and there's misconception that you want things to be in the center, and then it should be a bell curve, the shape doesn't matter. This shot is actually from a black and white penguin, and this is white penguin with snow, and that's the dark feathers, okay? You want this peak over, at least in this quadrant here, and if you get too far to the right, what happens? It's clipped, and then you get the blinkies, okay? So have your highlight warnings on, shoot it bright. If you start getting blinkies, then back off, okay? I just had to be complete, didn't I? So we'll keep moving a little quicker here. Storing your photos, obviously memory cards. And I think you guys are pretty advanced in, this is where the prices have come down, the cards have gotten bigger. I was in a situation with those killer whales, and I looked at my counter, I have only 99 shots left. Change cards. Because at 8 frames a second, if something happens, man, I'm through that card. That's 3 rolls. Isn't that sick? That's just 99 shots left. Change cards. Get a card. This is the only thing I'm going to say about cards to you guys, unless you have questions. Get a fast enough card for the camera model you have. There's no sense getting a racehorse camera at 8 or 10 frames a second and then having a slower card in there that can't keep up with your frame rate, okay?
How is that measured?
Yeah, I knew you were going to guess that. It's in megabytes per second on some, and I think we're up to, is it 90 now? Or by 600, I think 600x, is that top? So it's either, some manufacturers go in megabytes per second, it's like 30, 60, 90, or how many x, and 300x or 600x. So, I mean, you can probably go online and there's a 12-year-old kid in a YouTube video who will explain it to us, right? So again, you know, CF versus SD, that's all pretty obvious stuff. Downloading and backing up, you know you have to have 2 copies, right? You just can't download to your computer. That's not backing up. So you've got, I carry portable hard drives. This Velcro here, since I work remotely a lot on ships and other places, I stick a terabyte drive here, a terabyte drive here, card reader here, right on the back of my laptop. And then, right now I'm using these Western Digital 1 terabyte drives, 99 bucks. Although I hear the price is going up because of the problems in Taiwan with the floods. Fastest way to do it is through a card reader, right? Rather than hooking up to your camera. And I will download to 2 drives. I don't go to my computer because I'd fill this computer up. You know, I'm gone for 6 weeks on assignment, taking 15,000 pictures. I'd fill up my hard drive. So I just go directly to 2 devices. 1 hard drive becomes what I call the vault. Every picture that's shot goes in there. I don't edit out of that one. The other one is my working drive. I'll make a Lightroom catalog of the images that go in there and do editing on that side. So I can edit really brutally, and it's gone through the Lightroom software, and tags and thumbnails have been made, but I have the virgin files over here so that, you know, software gets better. You know, 5 years, who knows what I'll be able to do with those pictures that haven't been through Lightroom. So travel with a laptop. If you can even travel with a small one so you can see your pictures. Because if you have mistakes, you'll learn from them. If you're having problems, you'll learn from them. And then you can share along the way, especially if you're traveling in a group or workshop situation.
Would you ever use, in addition to the computer, an iPad as the second backup?
iPads are great, except for storage and moving your images around. iPads were built with the cloud in mind, that you're always on Wi-Fi, right? It's kind of clunky to try to get the.
But as I said, it's the second backup.
Well, you only have, what's the biggest iPad now? I keep looking at this guy because 64 gigabytes, That's 416 cards. You can do that in a morning in Antarctica.
Do you back up the catalog file on the computer?
Where do I keep my catalog? So not back, no, we're talking about backing up images to the hard drives, and then there's a catalog file, which is all the instructions for all the work I've been doing on these pictures, and I back that up, and it usually just goes to a file in that hard drive. I probably should store
I
them.
think you can store enough.
Yeah, I can put,
Yeah, you can have a backup for the catalogs in place.
yeah,
Which is what they recommend.
yeah, I probably should do that.
I'm not sure if it's catalog related concept. Are you talking about the XML file? Are you embedding the XML file in the DLL?
No, he's talking about all the when you work in Lightroom, the way that software works is that it's kind of like iPhoto, where the images come in and it goes through the software and they create these thumbnails, but the pictures exist in the files over here, but you can look at them in the catalog that kind of mirrors your file structure. That catalog, if the catalog became corrupt, that is all the instructions for the thumbnails became corrupt, the images are okay, but the catalog's corrupt. All the work you did, color correcting and cropping and spotting, exist on the catalog if you don't have another copy somewhere. And so I should have that. And if I look at it, I might be sending it to the vault, to the other one. If I'm not, I should double check that.
What about the XML issue? Do you embed your XML into your
I'm trying to think about it. That doesn't come into play unless I export the original. Like I've got RAWs, and all the instructions are in that catalog. If I were to export that original, I could make it a DNG, a digital negative, that would embed them. Otherwise, it would go as a RAW with a sidecar. Yeah, it would still go that way. All right, so hard drives. Any questions on hard drives? It's the way to go. Burning DVDs, forget about it.
One question.
Yeah.
Do any of them come with their own power packs? Like their own power supports?
These, and the ones that I use and the ones that you should buy are bus driven. USB or FireWire bus driven. That means it runs off your computer. I was really mad at Western Digital when I had a 17-inch Mac laptop that wouldn't run their drive. I had to have two USB double cord to make it run, and I've forgiven them though for this little unit here. Terabyte, $99, and it runs totally cool. It has no heat to it at all. I don't know how they've done it. All right. When you come on the ships, if you take a trip, if you don't want to travel with a laptop, we have a photo kiosk. We've actually gotten a Mac workstation now, where you can transfer and back up your stuff, so you can bring jump drives or hard drives. But I try to encourage people, though, at least travel with a MacBook Air or some small laptop, so you can really work with your photos. Jump drives now. I'm recommending that some folks who are only shooting JPEGs on these small cameras. I mean, yeah, they're expensive for 64 gigabytes, but you can store a lot of JPEGs on just a thumb drive traveling that way. So here's my comment on the iPads. It's just not a storage device. It's great for once you've edited your work and you've made your JPEGs and you want to display and share them, because images look beautiful on the iPad. So it's more for, the way it's described to me, and this is the way I use it, the laptop's for leaning forward and doing work. When I'm on my laptop, I don't want to be sitting reading the New York Times. I'm there doing emails and writing. The iPad's for sitting, leaning back and looking at magazines, maybe checking your email and following up on a few things, but it's not the workhorse. It doesn't take the place of a laptop. So when you travel, it's legitimate just to take enough memory cards. And let's say you're going on a trek to Nepal. Treat memory cards like film. Just get enough for the trip. Because it is a commitment to bring the laptop, portable hard drives. But for these ship type expeditions, the trips that I lead, or let's say you're going to come out to New Mexico or Arizona with me to do a workshop, you want to bring your laptop and be able to do all this stuff. So, I mean, obviously this is for pretty basic folks. I mean, if you haven't ever downloaded, do it. Everyone knows about reformatting your card rather than erasing. You go into your camera's function after you've downloaded it and backed it up, and you know that it exists in 2 spots, and it's worth going into those files and making sure the numbers are the same and everything's there that you've downloaded. You put it back in the camera and use the format function to reset all the directories and make sure that card is properly organized again. Yes?
What software do you use to store the images? Like iPhoto or?
Well, the software doesn't store the images. The software is for looking at them and processing them. And I use Lightroom, Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. Aperture is the equivalent on the Apple program. I mean, and you can get Lightroom for a Mac, but those are the 2 high-end ones. And then I will use iPhoto for making slideshows and for books, for making online books. So if you have a Mac, iPhoto might be all you need. And it's free, and for, was it $99 a year, you can sign up and get hour-long tutorials one-on-one at the Apple Store. And there's how many in New York?
3 years. You could actually get it going for 3 years.
For 3 years. Yeah. So that's the way to go. So reformat your cards. How do I carry and protect my gear? You know, what to pack, and I won't run through all this for you guys, but you got to be organized. This is Jason from B&H when he came to the ship, and things were more organized, but I said, hey, can we organize a shot here? And so here he was with everything. There's nothing worse than running out of memory. And when you go on your trip of a lifetime or on your vacation, you're going to shoot far more pictures than you ever dreamed of. Is that right, Judy? She just got back from South Georgia. So the way I do it is wheels. Wheels on your luggage, especially when they come to the ship. We hate carrying heavy duffels on board. Wheels. So I have a rolling bag that carries the camera gear. All right? And then I have a shoulder bag that carries my computer gear. And that is always carry-on. All right? That's always carry-on. So if all my bags are lost, I can still operate. My tripod will go. I can work without a tripod if I have to. Bring extra cards, extra batteries. I'll have a field bag then, a backpack that I can stuff with clothes. That'll be inside my duffel. And we have wet landings. So you can go with big dry bags. Some people use the garbage bag method, which is fine for most landings. Working in the weather. You want to be able to work in the weather, in the rain and the snow, because you can get great images. So people make, this is I think made from a gator, like a cross-country skiing gator. This guy made a rain cover. These Aquatech ones are great. They're really functional. They're $150. This, in my estimation, is the way to go. I think they're 2 for $5, 2 for $6. Rain sleeves. Wish I would have invented it. It's a baggie with a drawstring. Brilliant.
In terms of shooting from a kayak,
Yeah.
what would you?
Is it a whitewater kayaking or?
Let's say up in Alaska, in a strait, in a passage of Alaska.
Yeah, if you have a little dry bag that you can put the camera in and out of, because you can kayak, stop, take a picture, bald eagle in the tree, put it back in the bag. So it has some kind of, either a little Pelican case or a little roll-up. Like on river rafting in Colorado, we use a Pelican case. Knee pads are great wherever you're going because you can kneel down, do macro. You can kneel down in the Zodiac when things are on your side. You know, they're $5 at Home Depot. They're great. Or the gardening knee pads that you have. That's probably the best tip there in that slide. So again, I mean, you got to have your essential gear, from the cameras to to how you pack them, knee pads, batteries, extra memory cards. Do I really need my tripod? And maybe we'll wrap up with this one. No, you don't really need your tripod unless there's situations where you want to use it. Like shooting slow shutter speeds or using long lenses and getting sharp pictures. With higher ISO shooting, image stabilized lenses, you can get away with even shooting long focal lengths, handheld, or bracing yourself, holding it like this gentleman is in this picture, getting your elbow against, and rather than this way, right? Put your palm, put the camera in there, bracing yourself against a tree, against a building. But it does allow you to be more patient. How long can you stand there like this with your long lens waiting for the whale to breach or waiting for the bird to fly? Have you ever taken a picture just because you were so tired of bending over, or you're in an uncomfortable position, you just finally snap the picture, right? Oh God, I can't do it anymore. So a tripod lets you set up, get the composition, tweak it, take a couple of shots, stand up, get the feeling back in your legs and your back, and then get down and work it again.
Do you use monopods?
Yes, monopod's a great way to go. I use monopods a lot, especially on the deck of the ship, because now I'm holding the monopod's holding the camera, and I can look right over the top and wait for the bird to fly, the whale to breach. In Africa, when you don't have a vehicle where you can put your head out the top, I'll use a monopod, even just, it's just kind of sitting between my legs, but I got my 600 millimeter or even a 300 millimeter. Again, you're a lot more patient when you are not holding the camera.
Do you recommend bean bags on the ship?
And bean bags as well. I don't recommend this, the GorillaPods. They're great in some situations, but it transmits the vibration of the ship. So I travel with, I used to travel with a bean bag, but I finally got just one of these Bucky beans when they come in. The neck brace that has the little, well, I guess it's buckwheat, right? Fibers in it. So you can use them on the plane. Don't forget them. On the plane, there it is, right there, the Bucky bean. And then that works as a bean bag in Africa or on the rail of the ship, right? Tripod quick release plates. Doing this, I mean, you're not gonna love your tripod if you do that. So do you love your tripod? You do, well, that's good, but so we say carry your tripod. So this person's doing it right. And this is the way I see it most of the time. These backpacks now, these little places where they put the feet and it's all strapped on there, and then everyone walks around with the backpack, the tripod in the backpack, and here's the counterbalance technique. It's very good, makes you more stable. $500 tripod, not even extending the legs, but that's Stuart, one of my friends, and he's just using, I mean, this is, he's kind of framing the shot and then he'll extend the legs because he now goes vertical. But this guy's serious. He's taking pictures and he's not taking the time to set up his $1,000 tripod with that head on it. And he's not even using the legs. The way you use it, and there is a way you set up your tripod, right? I mean, look at this. Extend the lower section first so that you're always working right here, other than going like this, and then going like that. There's a technique to everything. Well, she's actually beaming it to her website, I guess. I don't know. That's the monopod. All right, another good use of it. Rather than put it down in the guano. Okay. Great cup holder. Hat rack. So it's amazing. But here's legitimate uses of your tripod or monopod. You can pre-focus and then set it on the 10-second timer and go beep, 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 click, and then look at it and keep doing it. And you can get pictures of things above and below. And I even hang it over the ship now, trying to get ship going through the water. I'm really worried I'm going to drop it, but then I can upgrade. The 1DX is coming. Yeah, and then for dangerous creatures, right? You can use it, again, putting it on a timer. All right, so seriously then about tripods, you're not going to get the shot of the bird there. Especially where, you're not walking long distances, you're going out in the park just for a little self-assignment, or you're shooting flowers in your garden, or shooting the night scene from the roof of your building, you'll make more thoughtful compositions and get better results when you mount your camera on a stable platform like a tripod. Yeah.
And I know what I'm talking about. If you're shooting video, you probably want a tripod because, I don't know if you guys all seen the wonderful YouTube quality it has for people when they're shooting video and they don't have a tripod.
Right. Yeah, the comment is, if you're shooting video, do your viewers a favor and shoot from a tripod. I don't know about you, but I have trouble watching the show The Office just because of the whole camera thing. I mean, that MTV look was really cool for a while, but it just gets tiring. It makes me tired to watch that television show because the camera's moving around. So video is a whole nother ballgame, but rock solid, either a beanbag on a rail, let things come and go from the frame, don't zoom and pan much unless you know what you're doing. Sharper images let you shoot slower shutter speeds, but you'll be more patient and you'll be more creative if you slow down and really look at the scene and study it. Just moving your camera up and down, sideways, just an inch or two sometimes makes a big, big difference.
Would you use a gimbal on a monopod?
The question is, would I use a gimbal mount on a monopod? And this is one of those free-flowing kind of mounts that you use typically for wildlife. And I actually do use the Sidekick. There's one called the Sidekick on a monopod when I have my long lens on there, just so I'm just not wrenching the monopod around to get my motion. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fine art. And we've talked about the neutral density filters. A polarizing filter is important to have. Don't leave it, and the reason I'm ending with it here is that don't leave it on your lens all the time because a cut stops. When you rotate it, it darkens the skies, it cuts reflections, but it's not a good protective filter because you're losing light. So you want that in your camera bag, in your filter case, for those situations where you want to see through the water or cut the reflection or darken the skies for clouds. If you have a skylight filter or a clear glass filter to protect your lens, that's what you should have. All right? Any other questions? I mean, there have been a lot of questions during the talk, which is great. That's exactly how I was hoping it would go. I really appreciate the interaction. Anything else I can answer?
Can you use I'm sorry, Ralph. Can you use a polarizing filter on the G12?
You know, I think there is a little one. You might check outside it because I think it has a thread to it or an adapter, doesn't it?
There's an adapter.
Yeah, there's an adapter
You
for
can
it.
take the front piece off.
Oh, there's a ring. Yeah, there is. There's a third party.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do you have any recommendations for people who are interested in video as well as photography?
Use a tripod. No, you said that. You know, sound is the issue. Depending on what you're going to do with it, the hardest thing with video is getting good sound. And it's a whole nother ball game. So if you're getting serious about video, it helps to have a partner that will travel with you, seriously, to do the sound. Because off-camera sounds better, or at least going to one of those shotgun Sennheiser type mics, and then be real. The one thing that the videographers on the ship, every one of our trips is shot by a videographer, and they edit a video, and you can buy it and you get it when you walk off the ship. These guys don't sleep, and what they're saying is to always give yourself breaks for cutting with video. So it's not like you can just, like that penguin sequence where you can just pick up the camera, point it at the penguin, have it run, have it walk towards you, and then just turn it off because you have no place to really cut it. So that's why you'll see videographers or cinematographers, they'll see the penguin coming and they'll let it walk into the frame, and then they'll hope that it walks out of the frame, and then they'll hold that blank screen for a couple seconds so that you have places to cut and edit, because it's shooting. It's one thing to shoot video, but if you're going to start doing something with it, having the places where you can edit and string things together is where the real art of it comes into, and then varying the types of looks that you get, right? Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate your attention.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.